Hello everyone. Today I will be working on the air conditioning for my 2002 Hyundai Santa Fe. I have the 2.4 liter engine in this vehicle, and this is an automatic. The things I will be replacing today is I will be replacing this valve back here, the TXV valve, also referred to as the expansion valve. So there you have that there. It's held in by 2 bolts. Also, I will be replacing the condenser, which is this unit here, and then this is the dryer. You'll hear people talk about replacing the dryer as well. And then the next thing I'll be replacing is the compressor. I purchased a Denso brand new condenser or compressor, and I will be replacing all of those today. So the first thing you'll want to do when replacing these is you will need to take your vehicle to a certified shop. That way they can properly evacuate the Freon from the AC system. Once you have done that, which I have already done, before starting any work on this, you'll want to disconnect your battery just to be safe. It's always a good rule of thumb to do. So I have raised the vehicle up. My first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to replace this valve here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the battery. Get that out of the way here. And then this is not completely necessary, but I am going to remove this plane. I'm doing all of this with a 10 millimeter. And then instead of removing each screw one at a time, just lift straight up. They shouldn't fall out anywhere. Alright. And that gives me plenty of access to that valve now. So I'm going to start with this valve here. Put a light over here to help see it. So there's 2 bolts on the front of this valve. You'll want to remove the 2 top facing bolts. I'm going to use a Torx bit. It's a TX30, or if you do not have that, you could get away with using a 3/16 just Allen. So go ahead and remove this real quick. So when removing these, be sure not to pull them out and lose your washer. Each bolt has a washer on it, and it can slide over the threads. So I'll show you there. There we go. This washer just can slide straight off if it ends up sticking. Once you have these 2 top bolts removed here, you can now remove this center bolt, and once you pull all this off, it'll come straight back. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That 3rd bolt did not have a washer on it. Looks like it just is actually recessed into the little hole there. Alright, so now that I have all the bolts removed, I'm going to pull back on it. So I'm going to pull it toward the front of the car. So the system was evacuated, so that was not Freon. It's probably just still under a vacuum. So you could pull it out and then slightly move it to the right so that you are not kinking any of the lines, and then wiggle your pieces off here, and there you have it. So then you will want to compare your new and old. So they look pretty similar. When putting all these back together, it is very important to make sure that everything is clean. So you want to make sure there's no debris on any of the O-rings when you're sealing everything back on. So now I'm going to go ahead and place this back in. Alright, so first we're going to take our new piece. We're going to pull these lines back, put this in place, and then you're going to carefully pull the lines toward the front of the vehicle. Try to position them. Make sure everything, you should not have to force anything. So, as you can see, it's all in there. Let me shine a light. Everything should be flush. It only fits in one way, so there should be no forcing, or you will damage stuff. So then you take your small screw here, get that started in the middle. Alright, and then you take your long ones. Well, we're going to actually need to torque that down first. Alright, so I have it finger tight here, so now I'm going to tighten it down, and I'm just going to cinch it down pretty good by hand. This is aluminum on here, so try not to be too rough with it. And then I'm going to start both of my bolts here. I could not find a torque spec for tightening down this valve, so I found one for 16 foot-pounds and 100 inch-pounds, but I am comfortable just torquing it down by hand. Once you have that center one tightened down, go ahead and start these ones, tighten them most of the way down by hand. Again, don't be too rough with it because it is aluminum. It could easily damage something. And then if your cap fits, your new cap, you place it over the top here. And there you have it. We are done with that expansion valve. Now I am going to move on to replacing the compressor. On how to remove the power steering and the AC belt from this vehicle, it's a little tricky to get to. If you look at the power steering pump right here, there's a pulley underneath the power steering pulley on this side. It has a 14mm nut on it. It's about 3 inches in diameter maybe. The pulley down there is, you'll want to loosen the nut on the front side of that. Once that nut is loosened, you'll come down here to the bottom of the power steering pump, and this is a 14mm right here. My finger's on it. You'll want to turn that to the left. Alright, so now after removing the belt and disconnecting the power, you'll come down here and loosen this nut. It's a 10mm, and then also this nut right here. It's a 10mm. Always make sure you're wearing safety glasses when working with refrigerant. You do not want it getting in your eyes. So go ahead and remove both those nuts, and then we will move on to removing the 4 mounting bolts. Alright, so here at the bottom of the compressor, you have your two 12mm bolts. I'm going to break both these loose and only remove one of them. And this will be the last bolt I remove right here, because I'm going to remove it and then let the compressor drop all the way down. That way it's not just going to fall when I remove the top bolts. So now I have all of the bolts, and I have the refrigerant lines disconnected up top and secured away safely. So now I'm going to push this hose here out of the way, and I'm going to see if I could slowly wiggle this down. This bolt is still threaded just a tiny bit, so all I have to do is loosen up that bolt and we'll go from there. So the compressor came out very easily. Once I loosen this bolt, I push the nose of the compressor toward the passenger side, and then slowly wiggled it down. As you push the nose over, you also have to make sure you push this hose over. That way the pulley doesn't catch on it. But it came out very easily. Took me maybe 30 seconds max. Alright, so I have my compressor removed, and just inspecting it and everything. So it was not rotating, and it started growling pretty well. The clutch wasn't engaging. Pulley obviously was still spinning, but the clutch wasn't engaging, and it started to make a growling noise. So then I decided I had to do something about it. But here you go. I mean, that's pretty that's pretty bad. But it was embarrassing to start up and hear that growling. Here's how it's supposed to sound. Yeah, so there's supposed to be no sound. But this is a Denso. It's a high quality compressor. Not the exact OEM, but it will definitely be sufficient enough for me. So now we will prep it. Alright, so here's just an example of draining the compressor. Alright, so I have drained the fluid from my compressor, and I have rotated the clutch. You want to set it on end and rotate the clutch, which is on the bottom side here, to release any of the oil that may be caught up or bound in it. So I have just over 5 ounces, which is 150 cc of fluid. So it was almost spot on in the compressor. That's what they said was in the compressor. So it was very accurate. So now I'm going to go ahead and set it up like this for about 10 minutes to let oil run through, and then I will go ahead and reinstall this compressor. So when reinstalling it, I would suggest putting the bolts on the bottom side of your compressor in. If when you try to pull the compressor out, I left the bolts in it because there wasn't enough space to pull the bolt all the way out this way. So make sure you put your bolts in before you try to position it in place, and just reinstall it in reverse order. Make sure that when you start each bolt that you just start it by hand, to make sure you don't cross thread anything or cause. Alright, so before trying to reinstall this, make sure you put your covers back over where the refrigerant lines connect. I'm going to show you, I have not tried this yet, so I'm going to show you my struggle in case this is a pain in the ass. So making sure everything's out of my way, and I'm going to try to install this in the reverse order. So I'm going to stick the nose of the compressor up. I do have my bolts in place. You have to mess around with them just a little bit. And that was way easier than I anticipated, by the way. And then make sure you get. Alright, so I have a bolt started in the threads. Alright everyone, so I have my compressor installed. It is not yet torqued down. These bolts, the 4 mounting bolts, are supposed to be torqued down between 14 and 18 foot-pounds of torque. And then you have these 2 bolts for your high and low pressure side. They get torqued down at least 3.7 to 5.2 foot-pounds of torque. So there you have it. I hope that helps. Alright, there you have it. I have my new AC compressor installed. Everything's torqued down and my electrical is connected. I also have reinstalled my belt and tightened it down in the reverse order that I showed you earlier. If you are not doing anything else, then now would be the time to reconnect the battery and take the vehicle to a shop and have it put on a vacuum test, and then they can charge it up per manufacturer specifications. In my case, I am not done, so I'm not going to reconnect the battery. Now I am going to move on to replacing my condenser. Alright, so now that I have the compressor installed, I'm going to move on to my condenser. This particular condenser has the AC dryer already welded in. In order to do this, you'll want to make sure your refrigerant is completely evacuated. Take notice of these two mounting spots here on each side. Those will be the most difficult to get to on this. Not a pain or anything, they're just in a tighter spot than everything else. So the first thing you'll want to do is loosen both of those, take those bolts out, and then you'll want to disconnect your refrigerant lines on top here. You can loosen those and then disconnect them when we're ready to actually pull the unit out. That way you don't get any debris inside the lines. Right, so approaching from the front of the vehicle, I have removed them. You can access one of the bolts right here. You can see right there. There's not a lot of space there. So there's the hole right there. Then go over to your passenger side, right across from your compressor, and you can see that I removed the bolt right here as well. So right there. So remove both of those. Alright, so I have the lower bolts on the condenser removed. So now I'm going to remove all of the screws here. We're going to take this plate off right here. These are all plastic, so make sure you're careful with them or else you'll have to replace them. So this should just lift up. Might have to wiggle a little bit, pull the sides out. Careful not to do it quickly so you don't lose any of the clips. So once you have this top guard off, your latch and assembly here will have to be moved out of the way. So these look like they are 10 millimeter. Use my impact on them. There's one more on the bottom here. So that can swing up or out. We'll move it when we need to. Alright, so I'll take now. Next step is to remove the 4 10 millimeter bolts on top of this guard. Alright, so I was hoping this was just going to lift off, but it does not. So it looks like I'm going to remove the bumper here. You got a bunch of these screws along the perimeter. When removing them, you may need a flathead screwdriver to pull up the two end clips. They are not screws. So you just pull them up, and then the fastener will actually stay in. So I have a total of, we have a total of 6 removed up top here. There are a total of 6 10 millimeter bolts on the bottom that run along the same pattern. Right, so if you slide down here, you see there's 10 millimeter bolts all the way across here. You have 6 of them, and then on the end you'll have 2 Phillips on each side, and then follow the trim of the bumper up, and there is one more bolt right there, or screw, sorry. So go ahead and remove those. That is a total of 6 screws that you'll need to remove. So Once you have all the lower screws removed from the lower side of the bumper, you'll need to remove the headlights. There are 3 10mm bolts to remove them. And then when removing them, you'll want to you'd wiggle them a little bit, make sure they can come out without damaging anything. So I'm pulling it out and pushing this way. Then there are 2 connections behind it. And then you just push them in and remove them. So just push in these tabs. Alright, so now there are 2 fasteners on each side. See if I can show you actually what I'm referring to. Alright. So you can see right here, this little clip. You don't want to break it. So you get your screwdriver under there. If you have it, you can use one of these tools here. These work really well. And then you want to lift up on this tab afterward. That way, if you don't pull this out, you'll either break the bumper by cracking it, or this will go flying somewhere. Now you'll need to disconnect your corner marker. You just push the tab and pull it out. And then I will back away. I have never taken this bumper off before, so we'll see if it comes off now. Looks like it's still catching on something. So I'm just wiggling all the joints. Once you have all of the bumper off and out of the way, you can come through. There's 3 bolts here. They're all 10mm. You'll want to remove this support bracket right here. So we got, here's number 4. And on the very bottom, we have number 5. So you have to pull these out. They have rubber grommets that are pushing through this. There is a clip on the back side. You just press each side in here, and then you can remove your hood latch cable. Alright, there's a lot of work to get that out. Alright, so now after having all the hardware removed, go ahead and remove both of the nuts holding the refrigerant lines on. I believe the new condenser comes with the nuts, but just in case, I'll keep those safe. So you just wiggle them, lift up, put them out of the way here. The same thing to the other side. Looks like somebody zip tied it. Alright, with your lines disconnected, you could separate the fan from the condenser just by pulling back on it. And then you push forward on the radiator, just not too hard, you don't want to crack anything. And maybe this will slide right out. And there we have it. So now I will go ahead and match this up to my brand new condenser. Make sure everything's gonna line up properly. Alright, so I matched them up. So now I'm going to take my new condenser and I'm going to place it in there gently, making sure that I don't brush it up on anything too hard. Alright, so I have the receiver dryer and the condenser installed now. It was a little finicky. Seemed to be a little bit narrower than I needed. I don't know if it seemed to be packaged really well, but it was supposed to be an exact fit. I did not buy a cheap condenser. I just did not buy an OEM condenser. But yeah, so now we will start reinstalling everything. I'm going to tighten these 2 bolts down, and then I'm going to put my centerpiece back in, and then I'm going to reattach my high and low pressure lines up top here. Alright, so the condenser's in place. I got the guard back up. So you want to tighten these 2 bolts up top. You have 2 bolts directly underneath this, and then there's 3 additional bolts. So you have a total of 5, so 9 bolts that you are going to position, and then once they're all in their holes, then you'll go through and tighten them all down. When reattaching your hood latch, make sure that you have your cable in this slot and that the cable has the fastener back in place on the back side. Just a plastic clip, but you want to make sure those are in place so this can't slide around on you. You want your hood to open and close properly. Alright, once your condenser is installed, you can come up top here and reconnect your high and low pressure line. They take a T15 Torx bit to put your new studs in. Most condensers will come with 2 new studs, but they do not come with the bolts or the nuts that go on them. So go ahead and tighten those down. Again, they go to about 5 foot-pounds. And then make sure that you tighten all your bolts for your radiator support. And then this support here also, you'll want to make sure you tighten all 5 of the bolts going down that. Alright, when reinstalling your bumper, be sure to take note of these. There are plastic clips that will slide directly over these, so you'll want to make sure you get those lined up. And then I also recommend just having 2 pins ready. They had the open ones for these, so you're going to, once you get this side in, put a pin in here to keep it from moving around, and then same thing for the other side. I know earlier I said I recommend having a friend. I don't have any friends, so I'm gonna try putting this on by myself. A little tricky here. See, all right, it's a little hard to see, but this here needs to be pushed so you can pull the bumper out a little bit and make sure you push that in. And there you go. Now I'll start running all my fasteners. Put the corner screws in, and then your 2 bottom ones, and then run all of them across the top. There will be a total of 8 fasteners along the top side of the bumper, so make sure you get all these in place. So now we will put all 5 of these bolts in here. They are 10mm, and then you'll come over here and put both of these screws in here. They are just those Phillips screws. They look like these. And then on the wheel well here, there's a screw right where my finger is that you'll need to run in up there. Right. Once you have the bumper back on, go ahead and place your guard back over your latch. This bottom hole down here, it takes just a regular screw, and the other 5 just take the fasteners. Just take your fasteners, just put them in the holes. Alright, now we are going to reinstall the headlights. It's not a lot of play for the power on these. Make sure you hear them snap. And then there is a tab that the edge of the headlight is supposed to go into. If it's not lining up, it means it's probably not in the tab. Alright, so I got sort them all by hand. Doesn't take much to tighten them down. Remember, it is plastic. Now we'll install this headlight. There's a little bit more play because these wires are a little longer than the other side. Make sure that you have your corner markers installed. Just position it.